Hey everyone, my name is Zachary, and you're listening to the Worn Shoes Podcast, the show that looks at people living around the world and the extraordinary in their everyday lives. In this episode, I interview Ismael, who grew up in Mexico and moved to the United States for high school and college. I hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome to Worn Shoes. How are you doing today?
Doing well, thank you for the invite.
Yeah, no worries. I'm excited to have you on and to get into our chat. Yeah, just to start off, would you be willing to tell me where do you consider to be home and where you grew up and where you're at right now?
Yeah, well, that's a tricky question because home is such a intricate concept. But I would say, that's what comes to mind when I think about or when someone asks where's home for you, because I haven't moved a lot in the big spectrum of things.
Yeah.
But I've never within my country I've moved a little bit, so I've never had but I guess I would call home Mexico.
Yeah.
But within Mexico, I wouldn't have a place where this is where I've lived my whole life, just because of how my dad's a pastor and he has moved to different churches. So I've mainly grown up in northern Mexico.
In northern Mexico.
Yeah.
Okay. That's awesome. And so you were in Mexico for your whole life and just kind of traveling around different parts?
So I was in Mexico until I was 15. And then that's when I moved to the U.S. to study high school at age 15.
So you came back to study high school. What high school did you go to?
Yeah, I went to a high school called Presbyterian Pan American in Kingsville in the state of Texas.
Okay.
Yep, boarding school. And yep.
So what was it like growing up in Mexico? And I assume that you guys traveled around for your dad to pastor at different churches. Is that?
Yeah. So we were in the place I grew up. I was there from 3 to 15. And then they moved around a little bit to different towns in a different state. But yeah, growing up was mainly traveling down because my family's from southern Mexico. Okay. And it was mostly traveling down to visit them. But yeah, where I spent most of my childhood, it never felt like the place where we were from. It just felt like the place where we lived and yeah.
So you lived in northern Mexico from 3 to 15, but your family was in southern Mexico?
Well, yeah, my extended family is all in southern Mexico, and it was just my mom, dad, and my brother living in northern Mexico. And northern Mexico has a different culture compared to southern Mexico, so it was always kind of we're just here and we have our own way of doing things or different food. I don't know, different words or... Yeah.
I mean, can you tell me a little bit more about that, the differences between southern and northern Mexico, or how you experienced that?
Well, I guess just the difference in food, they do different type of tortillas. Instead of most people in the south, they do corn, and in the north, they tend to do more flour, and even the type of beans they use to make refried beans, and just more variety of food in southern Mexico compared to northern. And where we were at, that's a border town.
Okay.
And I've heard this from different people, but border towns are always kind of rough. To me growing up, it didn't feel like they had a sense of identity or the same cultural richness as you go deeper into Mexico, just because it's a lot of transitionary people, people that go and try to cross to the US and they don't make it, and they just stay behind, or a lot of people from other countries that got stuck in Mexico. So there's a lot of transitionary kind of lifestyle in there. So I never met the people that were oh, we've been here for 500 years and we founded this town. It never felt like there was a sense of belonging or identity. It just felt kind of
it's an in-between space.
Yeah, it just felt like a literal the wall where people come to an end.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So the town that you lived in just felt like it was just constantly people shifting in and out, trying to cross the border, and
it felt like people came and go and went, and then the people. I guess I met people that were there, but it never felt like people that lived there, and I guess their parents lived there, but it never felt like this is we've been here for a while or a long time.
Yeah, no, that's interesting that it doesn't have as much of a cultural identity as it felt like your family in southern Mexico. So as a kid growing up in like this town that was like really transitory, just like with friendships and just hobbies, and was that what was that kind of like?
Yeah, I've always been kind of an introvert more than an extrovert.
Yeah.
So I didn't really try to go out there and be out there and do all the things. And plus the church where we grew up, it was pretty small. So there weren't a lot of young people.
Yeah.
But I guess mostly it didn't really bother me that as much.
Yeah.
It bothered me more like the fact of knowing that I was growing up away from my family. But then like I guess like then you realize like the people that you have around, that's the ones you're called to, I don't know, do community with and love. But yeah, I didn't really think about friendships, or like that didn't really bother me until like maybe growing up and maturing and like thinking about friendships and maybe college and adulthood.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And with how often did you guys get to go back and visit? I mean, you're just talking about being sad growing up away from family. How often did you get to go back and visit them? And
yeah, we would try to go once a year during the summer. And kind of go to my mom's side of the family and then my dad's side of the family.
Okay. What did you guys normally do when you for that summer?
Yeah, we would get ready to spend about 2 weeks visiting them, and then we would just like get on our car and travel for like 1 or 2 days, and then be with our family, eating, and I don't know, just doing life.
Just doing life together. Yeah, that's awesome. So I want to move into, you talked about going to school, and I forget the name of this town in Texas.
Pan American School.
Okay,
in
Kingsville, Texas. Okay, yeah. Was that a decision that your parents made, or you guys together, or something you wanted to do? What was?
I guess it was more of a decision that was made together. I always knew. So where I grew up, we were in the smaller church, and there was like a bigger church where a lot of people had gone to this high school.
Okay.
So it was always we always had it in our mind, and I knew it was kind of like an option.
Yeah.
So when the time came, I just kind of like was like, yeah, I really want to do this, and why not just experience something different and go to a different country, learn a language. So yeah, and then my dad, I guess he was never opposed to it, and he liked the idea of sending me to that school. But yeah, so when I finished middle school, then I applied and things worked out.
So yeah, I assume your primary language is Spanish. At that point in your life, did you know English coming to the States, or had you ever been to the States before?
No, I hadn't been to the States. So the first time when I came to the U.S. was like the first day that we were supposed to go to the school. So that was the first day I came. But yeah, I didn't know much English, so I guess I would say maybe like not even 10% of English, just like numbers, colors, and basics. But yeah, I threw myself in there, and then and a lot of people that go to that high school, they go there to learn English.
Okay.
I would say that maybe 90% of the students were from Mexico, there to learn English or just get a different education. But yeah, learn.
Yeah. So you say you know like colors and a few words, and you just moved to the States when you're 15. So it was a boarding school. Tell me a little bit about the experience of going to a boarding school. Yeah, moving away from your family and to learn a new language.
Yeah. At the time, it didn't seem super weird or odd, but now thinking back on it, 15 is really young age to like be on your own. But I guess we did it, and I'm fine. But so it was a good experience. Yeah. What I remember from that like first semester or first year, in general, that experience was kind of rough because I was expecting a different kind of experience than what I got. Yeah. But that was mainly because of, I guess, both cultural shock and also kind of like a religious shock. Yeah. From like the differences, because like even within the U.S., there's like different, like how Christianity can be lived out in different ways, and that was kind of a little different from what I grew up in, like how you think about Christianity. So I had kind of both a cultural and religious shock. but yeah, that first semester was hard, trying to learn English and trying to get used to the culture and way that things are done, and like
Yeah.
how the system, the educational system was different, and
Hmm.
yeah, just yeah, I guess just learning the language and not knowing what to, yeah, like a classes not knowing what was being asked of me, or what the homework was about,
Yeah.
was a little hard. But the reading in English teacher was really, she was there for a reason, and she knew how to teach people
That's awesome.
English. And
Yeah.
but yeah, the food was different, and yeah.
No, yeah, that's really interesting. Thanks for sharing. You mentioned religious and cultural shock, and I
Yeah.
want to ask you about both of
Hmm.
those, but maybe we could start with the cultural shock.
Hmm.
What were some of the biggest factors in that, and what impacted you the most?
Yeah, I guess just different. So the two main things that made it really stand out were like difference in food. So nothing like that, I guess, and also like school systems serve a different type of food than
Hmm.
what you would have at a typical U.S. home. But I guess just the different kind of diet that you would be used to. Food being typically more cold, like served cold instead of
Yeah.
warm, and you, of course, you don't have your tortillas all the time. And
Yeah.
but yeah, just the different food. I remember the first thing. So we arrived a little late because my we were closing. So my dad's pastoring a church, and we were closing a VBS, and he
Okay.
was like, "Oh, I'll be fine too." Even then, like that's a difference how my family would go about things, and
Hmm.
how you think. Like even, yeah, even us being like, "Oh, it'll be fine to go late," or like
Right.
just
Yeah.
they'll understand. But like no, like you just arrive, and like there's no one waiting for you, and like
Hmm.
first thing you get served is like a cold sandwich, and you're like, this is not a welcome.
Yeah. No, that's
Like,
not.
but I at the time
Yeah.
I didn't realize that was like a cultural thing.
Yeah.
Like I guess, I don't know, you expect different things. But yeah, food being different, and like the second thing would be like how people relate,
Yeah.
and just learning how to, like, all those like social cues of like when to, I don't know, how you should say things, or how you should behave, or
Is that like? Yeah. No, I'm curious what you mean by that. Do you like the tone or like
yeah,
when to
tone
say things?
tone
Yeah.
and like how people relate to each other in the space, like the
Hmm.
personal space. But yeah, just it'll be hard to pinpoint, but just learning those things took a little bit, and how to relate to your
Yeah.
professors, teachers, and
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. No. That's interesting with kind of the whole welcome thing, and no one being
yeah.
there to greet you and being served a cold sandwich. Yeah. With in the sphere of Mexican culture, North and South, is
Mhm.
hospitality something that's really big or
I
important
I
or
think so, because I mean, from what I've from the way I perceive things in Mexico, they really like being hospitable. Like, just like if you're gonna come home and visit, they're gonna probably cook a big meal and like be
yeah.
there and ready to greet you and welcome you, and like here, come and eat, even though you may be full, or even though you may not want to eat, they're gonna make you
Yeah.
eat something. But yeah, always, I guess a way that they show hospitality is by providing food for you, and like
Yeah.
just being there and available when you arrive.
Yeah, and you mentioned it being hot, and
Hmm.
having tortillas is kind of a
Yeah.
staple, is
Hmm.
like, and that kind of feeling the absence of that.
Hmm.
Yeah, and then and so you mentioned religious shock. I haven't heard someone describe that. So yeah, can you
Yeah,
tell
so
me
in
about that?
Mexico, there's mainly one. Well, there's different denominations, just as you would
Yeah.
have in the U.S., like Baptist, Presbyterian, Pentecostal. The main kind of tradition that is found in Mexico is the Catholic tradition.
Hmm.
But in Mexico, the way Protestants relate to Catholics is a little different. Because I always grew up never thinking like, oh, we share the same faith, or like the same type of. It always seemed like, oh, the Catholics, and then like we are
Oh, okay.
Christians,
Yeah.
they are Catholics. So it's a
So
little.
the differentiation between Christian and Catholic is like
I,
Catholics aren't really considered Christian, or
not in the like not in the
yeah.
way that most Protestants think of themselves,
Interesting.
because
Yeah.
but that's different. But like I guess what I was trying to like maybe describe was like I didn't. So here you have the you hear you see more of a difference between like liberal and like what's the other spectrum, conservative
Yeah.
Christianity. So you
Mm-hmm.
have those like very sharp in one end or very
Yeah.
sharp on the other end,
Right.
and anything and everything in between you
Yeah.
can see in the U.S. In Mexico, I didn't see that as much. Like most of the I would say most of what you would call the evangelical branch of the church, they're
Mm-hmm.
mostly very conservative.
Okay.
So growing up, I only knew one branch of the Presbyterian Church, and I wasn't. So when I came to the U.S., I was not aware of like PCUSA and PCA and
Yeah.
like OPC and
Mm-hmm.
RPC and I don't know however many other.
Named a couple things I wasn't familiar with.
So the high school I went to is affiliated with the PCUSA, so that was a learning experience for me, and like.
Yeah.
I've learned more, and I know like even like usually you tend to think of the PCUSA as the liberal branch of the church, but I think that there's like there might be still faithful churches within the PCUSA, and just as within the PCA might be churches that kind of just live by the rules and not really by faith.
Yeah.
But so it's been a learning. So, but at the time, that was hard to make sense of because, like, just like different things, like with how you approach alcohol and how you approach dances, and like how do you approach women being chaplains or pastors.
Yeah.
So just kind of like thinking through those things, and I don't know, kind of like having a faith crisis, I suppose, or I don't know, just kind of like, what is this different thing?
No, yeah. So yeah, having somewhat of a faith crisis coming here and just seeing that Christianity or the church is just kind of being lived out in a very different way. But yeah, thanks for sharing that. Can you tell me a little bit about high school, and I mean if there's parts of the faith crisis and kind of dealing with that, and then working through high school, and then
yeah I think so. Yeah, that was difficult to work through, but thankfully I kind of I guess that gave me an opportunity, a chance to own my faith. Because up to that point, it was like, oh, you're with your family, and
right.
I guess this is what you do. And but then at that point, that's when I was like, okay, this looks different, and they may do things that I may not agree with, or like I don't like maybe they should be doing things better.
Yeah.
But like that's when I had a chance to like ask myself, do I really care about this, or do I believe that this is true and this is real and it applies to me?
Yeah.
Or like the fact that things are different, what does that teach me about God and the gospel, and like how should I be thinking about these things?
Yeah.
But I think that was a chance for me to like grow up and like mature and like thinking through difficult things helps you to have a better perspective on life, and I guess form your own theologies of whatever you name it. But it gave me a chance to own my faith and think through things, and I definitely think that there were things that they could have done, because what I was expecting, so what I got from my college experience, I think that's what I was kind of expecting when I went to high school. But I think like they didn't really mesh well the spiritual and the academic parts. There was just like, here's your Bible class, and like it's just there, and like then the rest doesn't really apply. Like it's just kind of like you have your faith, and like, well, now you're out of the Bible class, and you just keep doing math, and like it didn't to me, it didn't feel like faith was an important role. It just kind of like, well, we have Bible class, and we're a Presbyterian high school, but that's about it.
That's
like,
about, and just so we know, where did you end up going to college after?
So Covenant College on Lookout Mountain, Georgia. Same kind of, well, also a Presbyterian affiliated college, but in a different denomination. When you would think of as more of a conservative branch of the Presbyterian Church. But yeah, that's
and right. How did you end up there, kind of finishing up high school and?
So did high school in Texas, but then this guy from St. Louis, Missouri had started doing ministry with my church, with my dad, and he is from like a Reformed Baptist tradition. When I was gonna go to high school, he was like, where are you going? What school? Is it Covenant? And that's the first time I heard about Covenant College, and I always had it on my mind. And
Yeah.
when the time came to apply to high school, to college, I applied to Covenant, to school in Texas, in a school in Missouri, and it just worked out that Covenant was
Yeah,
the one.
that's awesome. Yeah, and so leaving high school and going to Covenant, and even coming from Mexico and going to high school, how were you able to build and find community kind of away from your family? And yeah, how did you
Mhm.
find your community or build community?
Yeah, in high school, I guess it was mostly with my classmates.
Mhm.
I mean, it's just imagine yourself with 200 other high
Yeah.
schoolers, and
Hmm.
but I made a really good friend from Mexico, and yeah, he was mainly the one who I would like just spend time, do homework, and yeah, just goof around. And yeah,
Yeah.
it was a great gift to have him,
Hmm.
and it was a good year time in
Hmm.
high school. But yeah, that was about, I guess that was about it, because mostly just with the people and your teachers, and
Yeah.
just yeah.
Yeah. So just classmates, and
Yeah,
I assume at college, was it mostly with your kind of roommates and dorm mates, or did you
yeah.
find stuff outside of that?
So yeah, during college, mostly my roommates, and then home. There were so in college there was a lot more freedom to just go out, and as opposed to high school, because I mean, you're
Right.
underage and stuff.
Yeah.
But I guess, and yeah, and just being able to do community with your church and go visit churches, and thankfully I found a good church, and yeah, just mostly roommates, and
Yeah. And so yeah, being in high school and college, do you mind telling me a little bit about what are some of the things that you just like to do in your free time, or hobbies that you had
Mhm,
maybe during childhood, and that you have now, and has anything carried over,
mhm.
or yeah.
Yeah, so I would say maybe cooking, reading, and I did. So I guess most kids either do sports or arts,
Hmm.
and I guess growing up I liked doing arts better, so took violin lessons growing up. So I guess that was one of my hobbies, or my activity I did. So playing violin and just enjoying time with friends and chilling and relaxing.
Yeah. What are some of the things that you like to cook? What's your favorite thing?
Various things, but I usually like cooking or baking something that I know will be yummy.
Hmm.
I've
Yep.
I've done croissants in the past, which was
Hmm.
a big endeavor
Yeah.
because they take a long time. But yeah, just anything that will be kind of like challenging and like that I know will be yummy at the end.
Yeah.
Uh,
Do you tend to lean more towards cooking or baking? Because I've found
uh-huh.
I love baking more because it's really satisfying to like measure things out and then have something nice come out. But I know other people enjoy cooking
Yeah.
more. But
I don't think I have a preference,
hmm
but I guess baking might be more fun because it might be more. Yeah, it's more of a involved, and yeah, I guess more things could go wrong maybe, but I
hmm
don't know.
so maybe there's it's more difficult.
It feels more like going into a lab than like cooking.
Okay,
Yeah.
right. And so
Mhm.
so yeah, what speaking of labs, I mean,
Mhm.
I know that you currently work in a lab, but yeah, can
Mhm.
you tell me, what you studied at Covenant, and what you're doing now, and
Yeah,
yeah.
so I did chemistry at Covenant, and then I'm currently working as a lab chemist, and one of the companies here in town.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I guess baking it's more like going into a lab and measuring things out and making sure
Yeah.
that your dough rises or whatever needs to happen happens. So in
Yeah.
that way, it's more of a it feels more like a lab, or you might need to use more of your lab skills.
Yeah.
Um,
And so studying chemistry, was there, what kind of pushed you towards that and made you want to study that, or, um,
mhm.
yeah,
Not sure, but I always was fascinated by science,
yeah,
and when I think about it, I may have chosen chemistry because I like knowing or understanding things, like if whatever happens in my life, like I fell, I slipped, like why did I fall, why did I, like just knowing the
yeah,
reasons behind why do we have to sleep? Why do we get up? Why do we need rest? Why do I need to eat a varied diet and not just eat Cheetos all the time? Like, why would that, like, and
Yeah.
to me, it seemed like chemistry gave me the best tool to kind of go about life, and it was the best tool that would provide answers for me. Why do the falls turn red, yellow in the fall,
Yeah.
and why do they fall? And like, just like to me, it seemed like chemistry provided the best tool to make sense of the world.
And do you feel like studying chemistry and becoming a chemistry has provided you with answers?
I think so in some sense,
Yeah.
but also I think like, because growing up or like when I was younger, I would think like, oh, this is the only way about going life, and
Mm.
if you don't choose science, then like, who are you? Like, why
Mm.
would you choose to study English or like literature? Because
Yeah.
I thought of that as a silly, or like, why would someone want to spend
Mm.
their lives studying like poems, or like,
Yeah.
to me that seemed kind of silly. But thinking everything that I learned in college and like just the experiences and like getting to know other people, like I've realized that like there's different ways of approaching the world,
Mm.
and science or like chemistry is not the only, or the only thing that like makes sense. Like
Yeah.
there's different tools, different things in which help you make sense of the world and your experience. And yeah, I've learned that to not be as
Yeah, no, that's awesome. You mentioned a couple different things. Why we need sleep, why the
yeah.
leaves change color.
Hmm.
What is probably what's like the most fun
Hmm.
chemistry answer thing that you found, or one that you really enjoy?
I don't know. There's, I wouldn't, nothing comes to mind right now, but just
Yeah.
like the little things that you're able to explain with chemistry. Like I was talking to some people not too long ago, and like we were talking about beavers and like why they're good, good for the ecosystems.
Yeah.
And I just mentioned like, and they smell like vanilla,
Mm-hmm.
because I think their glands, I think their poop smells like vanilla, or they have
Yeah.
some glands that make their poop smell like vanilla. And you can just explain that by like looking at the compounds that those glands
Wow.
secrete and how they're
Yeah.
similar to like the vanilla
Yeah.
that you might get for cooking. And like it just makes sense. Like two compounds that are similar, they get perceived the same way in your nose by the receptors, and it's just funny. And like
Yeah.
like just like little things like that you might like, okay, why does this look that way, or
Mm-hmm.
does this smell that way? And you're like, oh, like you look it up and look at the compound, or why does ibuprofen help with my headache?
Yeah.
Like, you just look up the compound, see what it does in your body, and like it makes sense.
And does looking at the compounds and the chemistry, does that kind of, yeah, that's interesting. Just kind of you talking about like that providing answers to your life. Do you feel like that provides some aspect of security, just the knowledge and understanding of how
I think
things
so.
work? Or
Yeah, because knowing the mechanisms and the reasons for why things are the way they are, it provides some kind of safety, or like just knowing, okay, like now I can rest. Like now I know why I take ibuprofen when I get a headache,
hmm.
and I don't just, in my perspective, I don't just blindly take something and
Yeah.
let it work.
Yeah.
But you can always dig deeper, and like
Hmm.
you might never see the end of the tunnel if you want to see like, and why do we have receptors,
Right.
and why do these compounds act this way, or like you can just go on and on and on. But
Yeah, that's awesome. But yeah, how have you integrated, the culture? I mean, you growing up in northern Mexico and then your family being from southern Mexico, how have you found ways to, you know, live that out or not live that culture out, kind of living here in the United States,
yeah, definitely. That's a good question, and it's always, you never know if you're doing it right or if you're doing it wrong.
Hmm.
If like, but yeah, I guess that's something I think about often. But like, how do I? Because I've been here for about 10 years now, and like,
Yeah.
how do I? How should I think about me growing up in Mexico and me calling myself a Mexican while living in the U.S. and like,
Yeah.
that of course gives me a different perspective than people that haven't grown up in different cultures or different countries that
Yeah.
they may not have. So that's something that I need to think about and steward it well. and not just forget about it.
Hmm.
But I think I don't know, just little things with like I guess influencing the people around me and like challenge them to try new things or think of their lives or experiences in different ways, or how they can relate to maybe Hispanic people in town, or like things that they might not know about them, or things that the Hispanic people might not know about the people from here, and trying to be of help to them. But yeah, try new foods, new flavors, new ways of thinking, and but yeah, the church that I'm in, it has a good mission of reaching out to the Hispanic people, so I get to speak Spanish there and translate for people.
That's awesome.
But yeah, just not forgetting about my culture and keep cooking things from my country and to not to think of the differences and not kind of like dismiss one or the other or think of one as better than the other, but just to kind of like see why they're different and how can those perspectives give me a better understanding of my experience right now. Um, and the values that we have, and just
No, you mentioned helping people to understand how to relate to Hispanic people better.
Mm-hmm.
If there's if there's one, I mean, it doesn't just need to be one. You can say however much you want, but what would you say is kind of a big thing that maybe Americans or America in general kind of misses with relating to Hispanic people?
It's, I guess, something that would be very helpful with either being here or visiting countries in Latin America would be like maybe the big emphasis on like relationality when you go, like when you meet someone, and it's not just about getting things done, and like because this is how we approach life here in the US. Like we go somewhere, we get it done, and it's done, and like it's less. And something that I've noticed, and it's hard for me because I'm wired. So I grew up in this culture, but I feel like growing up, I was always kind of in conflict with how my family and the people around me did things, because I'm more wired. My default of doing things is more wired to how like people in countries like US or Japan or Europe might do things. So I was always frustrated growing up. But that's something I've had to learn, like the relationality of how we interact with people. Like you might be late to something, but like that's because you spend, I don't know, 20 half an hour more minutes trying to not make this person upset, or like you were caught up with something. Like it's just like thinking of those things makes me understand why we were always late, or why do people never care about time back home, and like just I would say understanding that how people relate in Hispanic countries might be more, there might be more of a relational aspect to it than you might have here in the US, and that's fine. For both.
Thanks for sharing. It's helpful. Awesome. Ismael, thanks for being on the Worn Shoes podcast. I appreciate it. And is there anything you'd like to say, or
just keep having fun and exploring the world?
Thanks. All right. Thank you for listening to my conversation with Ismael. I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode. If you did, I encourage you to check us out on Instagram at Worn Shoes Podcast, and to share this episode with your friends and family. Our next episode will be released at the end of January and will be taking us to France, so be sure to check that out. Music is done by Julian Laurie on Spotify, and cover art was done by Josh Platts. If you have an international story or experience that you would like to share, or know someone who does, please reach out to us at wornshoespodcast@gmail.com or at Worn Shoes Podcast on Instagram. I wish you all a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thank you all for your continued support, and tune in next time at Worn Shoes.